Okay, we are live.
Hi
Hey, Jangoo.
everybody. Hi Arun and hi everybody who's joined us live today on LinkedIn. Uh,
Hey,
good, af-
guys. Thank you so
good
much for
afternoon,
joining.
everybody. Today our session is all about account-based marketing, and we have Arun, who's a cohort of Upekkha, and he's got this venture called platform called Recotap. So he's the right guy to talk to us about account-based marketing. So, Arun, why don't you start off by introducing yourself, the problem you're solving, and a bit about Recotap as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, Jangoo. Nice to do this. This is my first time on LinkedIn Live. I hope to add some value to whoever chooses to listen to us, right? So in terms of what we do, I'm one of the founders of this startup called Recotap. It's almost a 3.5, 4-year-old company. We basically help B2B companies to do better marketing, right? So we bring in more efficiency, more effectiveness to their marketing process through implementing account-based marketing, right? And yeah, so like Changu said, we've been part of Upekkha for the last 3 years. We're helping companies both in India as well as globally. Most of our customers are early adopters of ABM, and then we really work closely alongside them to really help them putting together their processes and really help them in transitioning from traditional marketing to account-based marketing, right? So, and in the process, we also learned a thing or two, and then we try to cross-pollinate, help the community to be better in what they do, right? And then essentially like cut out waste, bring in more efficiency, and I think that's what we do through a platform.
So, Arun, tell me, how did you stumble upon this problem? Are you and your co-founders marketing folks, sales folks, enterprise sales folks, tech guys? So, what led to you guys creating a SaaS platform for ABM?
Sure. It's sort of an accidental discovery. So I do come from a little bit of sales and then building products for marketing, CRM. Most of my corporate work that I've done for two companies, primarily HP and Infosys, was around building large-scale systems, CRM systems for Fortune 100, 500 sort of companies, right? But so this problem actually was, or this ABM is something that we sort of stumbled, right? So Ganesh, my co-founder, he started this venture about a year before I sort of joined him. And the first version of the product was more around content recommendation, content discovery, and that sort of thing, right? So how do you provide Netflix kind of an experience for OTT companies, right? So that's the problem they were actually initially trying to sort of solve for. And as part of that, they've been part of the Techstars program in Berlin, which was co-sponsored by SAP, right? So in the discovery of improving the solution for the previous problem, right? So we sort of, when they worked with the executives from the marketing cloud, sales cloud, etc., right? So the one of the suggestion it seems was that like you seem to be solving something which is more reliable or more relatable to the marketing world, right? And ABM was something that I don't think they were aware of then, and definitely not. And then we did like sort of went into research mode, right? So there were all kinds of big players, all the marketers and SAPs, etc., were starting to invest, and then also the marketing community was trying to sort of digest this newer way of marketing, right? And then it made sense, and then that's when we sort of pivoted. Took about 6 to 9 months to reposition or build the product for the marketing use case, and that's actually when we started to work with the folks at Upekkha too, right? And then yeah, I think so here we are after like 3 years or so.
So great. So tell us and the audience, what exactly is ABM, and why do you think it works? What is it about ABM that makes it successful? What is it? Which is the sweet spot which we should look for when you're trying to go after ABM? And are there some preferred channels for doing ABM kind of stuff?
Sure, yes, a lot of questions. I'll try to see which one I remember and then
It's
sort of
more about
address.
tell us what is ABM,
Right.
how to use
Yes.
it.
In terms of what ABM is, I think so. If you talk to 10 different people, each of them might come with their own definition of it. But the essence of it is, how do you bring in more discipline, and how do you sort of connect different channel and connect things in a way that you put the customers up front and then do all the activities from the perspective of adding value to the customer or a prospect, and then converting into a customer, right? So there are three components of ABM typically, right? So one is, so you start with a set of, unlike a traditional marketing where you sort of spray and pray, right? You start with identifying a set of accounts which closely matches to your ICP definition, right? Take them, understand them, profile them, find out their needs, wants, etc., right? Figure out who are the decision makers, right? What is that they're looking for when they buy a product, like or service that you're trying to sell, and then try to address the communicate that problem, the solution, the value proposition, etc., from their perspective, right? The essence of ABM is that, right? So you start with a carefully curated list of accounts that you think is the will add more value to those such kind of accounts. So once you have the understanding of the accounts, right, profiling done, then you start to communicate in a way, like I said, which makes sense for each of these persona, right? So when a CFO, for example, is evaluating a product versus a CTO, so each of them, they come with their own sense of how they evaluate the purchase, right? Now, if you can translate that communication, right, to that persona, so the I think the hypothesis is that they will resonate to your messaging, communication better, right? And that's where the personalization sort of comes in. And then the third pillar is like, how do you not uh, go and then acquire customers, or like go after customers in a very siloed way, right? So whether you're from the sales, marketing, customer function, customer support, success, etc., like how do you, again, like I said, how do you show a single face, right? So throughout the buyer journey, right? So regardless of which function is trying to communicate to that particular audience group, right? So how do you message and be consistent in your approach, and more so in the digital buying world that we are in post COVID, etc., right? So they don't really like sort of like care which function you're from, right? But like whether you're a sales guy trying to book a meeting, or a marketing influencing that meeting, right? So if you're able to sort of keep that messaging consistent and then show a single face, so I think the customer experience improve, and then hence your brand value and things like that. The chances of they becoming a customer improves. And I think these are the three different pillars of ABM, right?
And in SaaS, we have so many channels which we can use. So when you're going through the ABM route, are there some preferred channels, or all channels come into play, or what is it?
I think the way we like to think is like ABM sort of helps to unify, right? All the different channels. It's not an inbound versus an outbound, or a social media marketing versus a content marketing kind of a discussion anymore, right? So if you're doing an ABM, so chances are that you might have to tap into all these channels at some point of time, right? And now, how do you want to sort of tap into channel is something that comes into the planning of ABM, and hence ABM, and we'll talk more about that, right? But in terms of like the investment required, the times that is required, so ABM is not a like a switch off a button, buy a platform, buy some accounts, right? Suddenly your marketing process suddenly starts to show an upward trend, right, in terms of ROA, etc. It's not that, right? So it requires a lot of effort, right? And like as the specific answer to your question is, I think we see as a medium to connect and bring in all the channels which are relevant for your audiences, and then and again bring in that unified kind of a view.
Makes sense, makes sense. So Arun, let's talk like the Americans. So do you guys eat your own dog food? Does Recotap itself use ABM to get your clients?
Not initially, right? So I think so. Like every like an initial stage startup, right? And I think it is like ABM is something that requires, like my previous response to your previous question, right? So it requires a little bit of fundamentals to be in place before you can start investing in ABM, right? So We were not doing it, but we were just about starting to use our platform. But like aspects of the ABM, so we've been using it because like more understanding, you sort of get it, right? So you use it in different ways to bring in more efficiency in our customer acquisition process.
From an industry point of view, is ABM like more suited for certain industries, certain type of industry buy behaviors, or it's kind of agnostic? How does it work?
I think it's agnostic, but like one of the primary requirements, right, for you to do ABM is the data availability. So there are certain industries where the data is available. For industries like yours, right, for example, sustainability or another other emerging kind of an industry, right? So the way, so we've had conversations with Web3 kind of a companies, right? So I think it's a little difficult for those kind of companies where the data availability, right? So trying to figure out who this, specifically in Web3 kind of use cases, right? So these people, right, are a sort of a different community that they don't like sort of hang out in traditional channels and things like that. So they are in Discords and other newer mediums where we don't have access to that medium at scale, right? So there are, and I'm sure like down the road, so we'll also be able to tap into and then bring that into sort of the overall experience. But like largely it is very industry agnostic. So there are tools which are now coming into picture, specifically going more vertical, right? But as an ABM as a framework, as a practice, I think it is more horizontal.
Cool. Arun, I know you mentioned that for Recotap itself, initially you didn't use it because you need data and stuff like that. But for a lot of people who would be watching this and our cohorts, one of the key tasks would be to get their initial 5 or 10 main customers. So, is ABM a good strategy for them to do that? How can they use it in case they have data, they don't have data? What do you suggest?
I think not. So I like I initially said and sort of alluded it to a couple of times. So I think it needs to. It's a sort of a mature process, and it needs to sit on some of the fundamentals that you need to have before, right? So be it content, be it let's say the availability of data, and more so, right, in the initial 5 customers, you've really not figured out your ICP yet, right? So you're doing like a lot of experiments and then trying to like maybe like every, if not every week, every month, right? So you're trying to do multiple experiments, right? You're trying to get some referrals and stuff like that. So you're in the discovery phase of the ICP, right? So without the understanding or a good understanding of your ICP, right? So you wouldn't be able to choose the right accounts. And if you don't choose the right accounts, you're sort of, first of all, you're narrowing down. And then if the narrowed down list is very, if it is not related to or related to the ICP or it doesn't fit the ICP, right? So then you're sort of like barking at the wrong tree, right? And obviously it's not going to yield you results, right? So, and like I said, at the initial stages when you are like 1 to 5 kind of a customers, right, your processes, internal processes, the availability of people, budgets, resources, and other things are also going to be limited, right? And like I said initially, it's a way of connecting different things together and putting and bringing in more uh, efficiency in the overall process. So I wouldn't start doing ABM on day one, right? So I'll figure out. So I think so. The older way of approaching, using all these, if folks have read through this book called Traction, right? So there are about 18, 20 or different channels on which you can try it and then see where your audiences are going to be present, which channel can you tap into and things like that, right? And I think that process still works in terms of finding the first 5, 10 customers. Then you start to have some sort of a data availability, the process maturity and understanding of your customers. Then I think you can, again, like I said, bring all of this together to build your ABM program. So this requires a lot of investment, right, to have and this is a sort of a long-term thing. It's not like I said, right? So you just by building a list, you don't have an ABM program in place, right? So at best you might be doing like just marketing to a set of accounts, not necessarily ABM, which is like it has got a broader scope than marketing to accounts.
So, tell me, Arun, what I'm trying to get my head around here is that as you've articulated, ABM requires discipline, data, effort, etc. So, in your experience, is there like a minimum annual contract value (ACV) that a company should have before it goes for ABM, or it doesn't matter?
No, I think it absolutely does, right? So if you're selling something for $10 per month, for example, and if your gameplay is around volume, right? Then I think ABM is not a good fit. It is basically good fit for products, services with higher ACV, right? At least 20, 30, 40K sort of an ACV, and also longer sales cycles, right? And I think so between these two, you should be able to determine whether this is something that you need to, so, right? So you can't do an ABM for, like I said, right? So if your ACV is like $400 or $200 something, right? So then you
So,
need a
what
high,
what what would be the minimum kind of benchmark? 5K, 10K when it
like I
starts?
said, yeah, but 2030s, upwards of 20, 25, 30K is what I think you should start thinking of ABM, right? So there's a lot of hype around ABM. So this is a like fairly new sort of concepts, right? And then marketers have started to bite into this, and then it is in a way that is has come to that, like you do that. I think on one side, if you're not doing ABM, then you're not doing marketing, right? And the other side is right? So if you sort of start claiming that I'm doing ABM, right, and all of the marketing problems that you would have is something that's taken care of automatically because you bought into this fancy tool, right, and things like that. So I think there are, so while it's good that there is a lot of awareness towards and an alignment to a better way of marketing, but I think there is like the know-how and like the where to fit in, how to fit in things like that is still sort of people are still getting hands on.
Cool. Is there like a preference? Is from what you're describing, is outbound a more preferred thing, or ABM skewed more towards outbound versus inbound, or how is the thing?
So you, like I said, so it is not that, right? So this is a way to bring both of these processes together, right? So you need to have an inbound channel, and basically, like again, like expanding on the previous question, right? So if you have something in working like an inbound, right? So you get a lot of traffic, and then you're able to generate enough number of leads, but the leads that you're getting is definitely not necessarily aligned to your ICP, and you're getting like wrong set of leads, and you want to sort of make an improvement, right? And then you can sort of bring in ABM into that, and then use the initial process that is working to qualify accounts, right? So you can put filtering criteria to say, okay, so I'm generating this pipeline or the funnel, and I'll have this way of filtering what accounts does it match to me, and then now I put them into different series of workflows. So I'll qualify them first, and then you'll do whatever activities that I talked about in terms of setting up your initial set of the ABM process, right? So what kind of company is this? Like what? So we didn't talk a lot about intent. So there's also another thing that people, I think, like it's almost synonymous, right, between an intent and ABM, right? So which is a way to see whether the accounts that you've chosen has got the buying intent or not, right? So maybe if you have access to that kind of a data, so you also overlay that and figure out that whether this company that it has come through inbound, right? Are they in the market, or would they be in market anytime soon? If they are, then you basically also have to nurture them over a period of time, and then you sort of, that becomes an outbound kind of process, right? And you can use channels like email, you can use channels like digital ads, right? Maybe events, right? Whatever, so webinars and all of that, right? So you will now, you have this, we call it as a dual funnel, right? So use your funnel that's already working and bringing in leads, but not necessarily highly qualified leads, or like a majority of leads are not necessarily great, right? So but you still use that process to sort of identify, right? And then at least you know that there is, these are the accounts which has got some sort of a demand, right? You sort of tapped into it and nurture them, and then use the ABM campaigns to convert them.
Cool. So Let's shift gears, let's shift continents. So let's go to the land of promise. Everyone in Upekkha is, I think, driven and rightly so towards entering the US market. Is there any difference when you make your ABM strategy for the domestic India market versus the US market?
I think the strategy would be the same, but when it comes to platform capabilities, right? So, and the data availability, right? So, both in terms of identifying the account intelligence and also what we call as the target intelligence, which is trying to reach these accounts through various digital channels, mainly through ads and things like that. The quality of data is definitely better in the US, then comes Europe, and then the countries like India and the rest of the countries in Southeast Asia. But like I said, it's end of the day, it's how it's the strategy, right? So in terms of, and it revolves around like having a better understanding of your ICP and understanding around prospects and your customers, right? And if that understanding is there, and I think regardless where you wanted to sell, whether to India or to Africa, right? I think the strategies are going to be the same in terms of ABM.
So there is, so one is the strategy part, but even on the execution side, is it similar or?
It is definitely similar, right? So the like I said, so there could be like how many. Let's say you have like 500 people to reach. How many of that 500 people can you reach through different channels? Especially when you're doing ads, for example, right? So if it is 80, 70, 85% in the US, right? So that percentage really comes down here, right? In countries like India, because of the data quality and things like that. But other than that, in terms of the strategy and the execution and how you set up your campaigns, how do you orchestrate it, right? And how do you engage with them? At what point of time do you bring in your sales folks, right? And all of that involves a lot of planning, upfront planning, and the execution, regardless of which type of customers that you want to acquire, it remains the same, right? And of course, there would be like industry specific know-how that might be required that needs to be applied, but that is more a campaign strategy than at a very high level. I think it does not change a lot.
So let's assume that you are a first-time founder as a company, and you've got your traction, good amount of business in India, and now you think you're ready for the US. You kind of got some basic data in place in terms of target market, the focus universe that you want to go with. You have some reasonable idea of the ICP based your India experience. It might get tweaked a bit. Uh, can ABM kind of kickstart or accelerate your process of entry into the US?
Uh, I don't know about acceleration, but I think this is definitely a long-term sort of strategy, right? So where you have something that's working for startups in this stage, right? So you have some captive customers which you have acquired initially in India. Now you wanted to expand or diversify, whatever that term is, right? So now, in so with that sort of a background in place, right? I think in that kind of a situation, I think you can start with ABM, right? Where you with the initial understanding of the customers, right? So you'll be able to even identify the right set of target accounts, right? And if you have that, right, I think and provided you have a take a long term view, right? So like I said, I've been insisting, I've said at least two three
Yeah.
times, right? This is a long term kind of a strategy that you have to have, right? Not so I've done an ABM for 2 weeks, I've not got any results, right? Does it mean that ABM is not going to work for me, right? It's a typical question, right? So when can I have ROI, right? Right. So these are like basically bringing more, like we discussed initially, the right ABM allows you to bring in more efficiency, discipline, and coordination and things like that, right? That does not change the buying cycle or process of a customer, right? If it takes 6 months for a customer to make a decision, just because you have shifted your marketing process, suddenly it does not become 3 months or 2 months, right? So you need to have an understanding based on your, and that is when tiering, for example, you might want to, let's say, reach out to 100 or let's say 500 accounts, right? That's part of the best fit ICP that you have, but you necessarily have to break them further down, right? As a marketer, I think it's a common sense, but typically it doesn't get done, right? How do you create micro segments and then really figure out the needs of like smaller cohorts, and figure out their buying cycles, patterns, and things like that. And this is why ABM is really time taking and investment heavy, because you need to have people, you need to have time to do all these researches. Right now, when you have this done, I think like once you start to have the flywheel working, I think it would start to sort of spin faster and faster, right? And as you start putting more fuel, but for you to move and build that initial flywheel and then make that move, right? So it's definitely a time taking effort, right? And like I said, we've been working with customers and helping them implement ABM for the last 3 years at least, right? So then we've not seen anybody maturing their process, right, before 3 to 6 months, right? So that's the timeline typically that it takes for you to figure out various aspects of like what works. How do you like even starts from identifying the right accounts, right, and figuring out the fitment based on the initial set of campaigns. So there are like multiple moving parts, and for you to really have a good understanding of all of this, it takes some time.
Cool. So you're saying that ABM is for someone who's got the patience or the cash runway also to hang in there for 3 6 months minimum before he or she starts seeing. uh,
Absolutely, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
right,
And
absolutely.
just a curious question. So, say an ABM platform, say it costs 100. Uh, Now, what percentage of an overall ABM budget goes into the ABM tool that Recotap kind of thing gives? So, for example, if I'm paying $5,000 or $10,000, is it that my budget is $200,000 or what is it?
Yeah, I think around, I would say about 10 to 15%,
Okay.
right? The tool cost ideally to make sense, right? So if you're investing, let's say $1,000, which is our starting plan, right? And if you're not spending like 3 or 4 times than that, right? So this investment that you're just making on the tool is not really like a good arithmetic.
And uh, so I'm sure there will be nuances to the pricing in terms of size and users. But say for a typical startup, which is say around 300-400K run rate in India, wants to enter US and it's got some data and stuff in place. What's the kind of budget they should think about for using an ABM tool?
I think so. This is something that like I talk a lot when we get into demos, right? So like I typically in conversation try to figure out whether they are ready or not, right? So tool is something that I think that has to be the third choice. So you need to have the right process. So people, process, and technology, right? So you can do ABM, and even within Upekkha, right? So Alma base, I think so. They even did a session about few months ago, right? So they don't have any tool, but what they've really done, I think, so it's a fantastic sort of an ABM effort program they have. I don't know how they're doing it today, but a few months ago, somebody did a presentation in terms of how their overall outbound process that they had initially, they sort of evolve that into an ABM sort of a process, right? So this is without any ABM platform, right? So they were like high on emails before, but how they leverage that email list and how they contacted their prospects and how they message to them, how did they communicate and things like that has like was like very different from how when they were doing like a very mass marketing, right? So instead they created smaller lists, and then they try to understand the really the needs of their customers, their prospects, and in the communication that they basically brought about all of that, right? And which apparently like made them I mean the overall program effectiveness between how it was done previously to how they've done after this they sort of started to take an account view, right? Apparently it was like few x's different, right? So the misconception is that when I wanted to do ABM, so I need to have a platform subscription, right? So the platform helps you to scale, but not necessarily solve all the planning problems, strategizing, content, and all of that, right? So no platform will solve for that. There's a lot of AI involved, currently, but it does not beat the human intelligence as yet.
Cool, Arun. One last question.
Sure.
Yusuf, I hope you're there. Is everyone's screen moving well? Network issue, etc. Yeah, Arun, I think it's frozen for a moment. My network and your network, I don't know. So when you're, kind of pushing Recotap to a client, what is the play? Is it like use Recotap to increase your revenue or increase your efficiency or save time, or what is it? Supposing you go to Alma Bay, say they're doing a ABM, now you say, okay, fine, do ABM using my tool. Are you going to promise him more revenue, more efficiency, more time saving? What is it?
I think one of the things what we don't do is to push, right? So you use the word how do you push? So we try not to push, right? So we try to make it as a pull effort, right? And we enable them with whatever information that we can provide in terms of jump starting their ABM program, right? And in the process, we sort of try and create a lot of credibility, and then when they're actually ready, so they come and talk to us, and then we help them to sort of make a switch. But in terms of what's the value proposition, if that is what you're asking, right? I think it is more around engagement to start with, and how do you translate that engagement to an opportunity and then eventually to deal, right? So for us, I think some more accounts that we sort of help our customers to reach, and then like build that engagement pattern using multiple channels, right, multiple mediums, and then sort of have a way to instead of just like marketing today, right, typically, right, in the absence of any market tools, it's like a big black box right now. So what we sort of try and do is to lighten that black box, and then show what's really happening inside, right? So in terms of how their accounts, right, their customers are moving, where are they engaging, what are the places where they're getting stuck, and things like that, right? So with that sort of information, like I said initially, right? So whether you're from the marketing team or a sales team, so they can fine tune their messaging accordingly based on what is happening within their target accounts, and sort of communicate the value proposition, right? And I think so in any ABM, the primary measure is how well are you engaging, how well are you able to track the different interactions that are happening everywhere, right? Since predominantly it is a multi-channel kind of an effort, and bring them into one place where you start to make sense out of what's happening, right? In a way, sort of culturing your own intent, right? And using that, you design programs on campaigns to engage with them, and move them towards the conversion stage.
Cool. I think this was very interesting. I personally have learned a lot about fundamentals of ABM and when to go for a tool kind of thing. So
Sure.
before we wind up, in your own, you've been through the Upekkha journey and you're a part of it. What's the value you found in Upekkha? What do you think about the whole concept of value SaaS and the community? How has it helped your own journey and acceleration?
I think whole lot. I think we were like been associated with Upekkha for more than 3 years now, right? And I think when we actually did the pivot, and then when SaaS was something that was new. So while we knew how to build product, I think what we really lacked is how do you sell this product, how do you market this product, right? How do you communicate the value proposition? And all of that's most of what I'm talking about is something that we were not very aware of right now. I think that program, being part of this program, engaging with other fellow founders, etc., has given a lot of clarity. And we being a tech company, so we were also forced to learn a lot of marketing concepts, right? And also ABM being new, right? We were also forced to help other customers, right, to be successful, right? So all of it in a way has really helped us. But in terms of the value SaaS concept, and I think it's a sort of an alternative view or a way of how you build, scale, and and continue your startup, right? So so I think it's more around that. If it is a new age company startup, the funding, for example, is not the first thing that you worry about, right? So it's about how you identify the high value problem, how you build that a solution to that high value problem, and then and basically having a control. So I think the Upekkha calls us a founder optionality or stakeholder optionality, right? So where you sort of chart your own path, right? And then instead of just letting anybody else control your destination, right? So and building another thing. So the value SaaS concept is something that we completely subscribe to, right? So where you're building companies for long term, right? And then trying to sort of uncover value for everybody who's part of this, and not necessarily to a pocket of individuals or stakeholders which would benefit more than the others, right? I think it's more about bringing in some sort of equality in the whole process of building, scaling, and then eventually making a value out of it. So I think that's how we sort of see Upekkha and then the concept of value SaaS.
Great. I think this was a wonderful 40 minutes that we have spent together. I hope everybody who's watching this or going to watch it in future benefit from what Arun had to say around ABM, and I'm sure hopefully some people will reach out to you and maybe get converted into clients soon. So thanks very much, Arun, for your time this afternoon, and thanks to everyone who's watching this or who's going to watch this in future.
Thank you
Good day
so much.
and
Nice talking to
goodbye.
you. Yeah, thanks a lot. We'll talk soon again. Bye.